Two people decide to start running. One says, I'm trying to become a runner. The other says, I'm trying to run 3 times a week. 6 months later, one of them is still running. The other quit in week 3. Here's the strange part, the one who quit had the better plan. A schedule, an app, a training playlist. The one who kept going didn't even have a plan. So why did the vaguer one win? Most people build habits backwards. They start with a goal, lose 10 pounds, write a book, save more money, and then bolt on some actions to get there. It sounds logical. It's also why most habits fail within a few weeks. There's a completely different approach, one used by people who actually keep their habits for years, not weeks. It's not about the goal at all. It's about identity. In this video, we'll break down why identity-based habits work when goal-based habits don't, the traps that come with getting identity wrong, and exactly how to rebuild a habit so it sticks. This idea has been circulating in behavioral psychology for a while now. There are actually 2 directions you can build a habit from. You can start from the outcome you want and work backward, that's outcome-based. Or you can start from the kind of person you want to be and let the habit flow forward from that, that's identity-based. Most self-help advice defaults to outcome-based because it's measurable. You can track weight, dollars, word counts. Identity is fuzzier, harder to put in a spreadsheet. But that fuzziness is exactly why it's more durable. Identity doesn't need a finish line to keep functioning. And that difference is the whole video. When your habit is tied to an outcome, I want to lose weight, the habit only has meaning as long as the outcome hasn't happened yet. The moment you hit the goal or the moment progress stalls, the motivation collapses. Psychologically, outcome goals create a finish line, and humans are notoriously bad at sustaining behavior once the finish line disappears or feels out of reach. Someone loses the 10 pounds they wanted to lose. Within a year, most of it comes back because the goal that justified the behavior is gone. The habit was never anchored to anything permanent. Identity-based habits flip the direction. Instead of I want to run a marathon, it's I am someone who runs. The habit stops being a means to an end and becomes evidence of who you already are. Every time you do the small action, you're not chasing a result, you're casting a vote for a version of yourself. Someone who says, I'm a writer, doesn't stop writing when a project ends, because writing isn't tied to that one project, it's tied to identity. There's always a next page because there's always a next day of being that person. Here's where people get it wrong even when they try identity-based habits. They try to declare an identity without building evidence for it. Saying I'm a disciplined person while skipping the gym for the 3rd week in a row doesn't create discipline. It creates a gap between self-image and self-behavior, and that gap is uncomfortable enough that people usually resolve it by quitting rather than by closing the gap. Identity has to be earned through repeated small proof, not affirmed through wishful language. This doesn't mean identity statements are useless, they're a starting compass. But they need small, almost trivially easy actions backing them up immediately, or they become just another form of self-deception. This is why the advice to start absurdly small isn't really about efficiency, it's about identity math. One push-up doesn't change your body, but it does let you honestly say, I did not skip today, and that's a data point your brain uses to update who it thinks you are. Enough data points and the identity becomes real, whether or not the outcome has arrived yet. Consider someone recovering from a long period of inactivity after an injury. They didn't set a goal to get back in shape. Instead, every day they did 5 minutes of movement, not because 5 minutes mattered physically, but because it kept the identity of someone who shows up alive during a period when bigger action wasn't possible. A year later, that person was training normally again. The 5 minutes wasn't the workout, it was the bridge that kept the identity from breaking. Sometimes a new habit fails not because of laziness, but because it collides with an existing identity. Someone who has spent 15 years thinking of themselves as not a numbers person will unconsciously sabotage a budgeting habit, because sticking with it threatens a story they've told about themselves for over a decade. The resistance isn't really about the habit, it's about protecting an old identity that the new behavior contradicts. Someone trying to save money might quietly overspend right after a good month, almost as if correcting course back to the bad with money identity that feels familiar, even if it's not accurate anymore. Here's the idea that ties all of this together. Habits aren't really about what you do. They're about who you're voting for, one action at a time. The outcome trap fails because it's voting for a result. The evidence trap fails because it's voting without showing up to the polls. The identity collision fails because there's an opposing candidate, an old identity, getting votes too, out of pure familiarity. Every single time you do the small version of the habit, you're not making progress toward a goal. You're casting a ballot for a specific version of yourself. And identities, like elections, are decided by the majority of votes cast over time, not by one dramatic day. Rewrite the goal as an identity. Instead of I want to read more, write down I am someone who reads. Say it in the present tense as if it's already partly true. Pick the smallest possible proof. Choose an action so small it's almost impossible to skip. 1 page, 1 push-up, 5 minutes. The size doesn't matter, the vote does. Track the votes, not the outcome. Use a simple checklist or calendar to mark each day the identity showed up. Watching the streak grow is watching the identity become real, independent of whether the big result has arrived yet. You don't become a runner by finishing a marathon. You become a runner by lacing up on the days you don't feel like it, and the marathon just shows up later as proof. Every habit you've ever kept for years started the same way, not as a goal you chased, but as a vote you kept casting. If this kind of breakdown, the psychology behind the habits and mistakes we all make, is useful to you, subscribe. This channel is all about the hidden reasoning behind success, money, relationships, and the habits that quietly shape who we become.